What's up, everybody? Peter McKinnon here. Welcome back to yet another video. I did the what's up because there was one comment last week that said, why don't you do that in your videos anymore? So whomever commented that was for you. You might be thinking to yourself, Pete, you're looking a little rough. Yeah, maybe. Maybe I am. I dig it. We're talking Lightroom today. We're talking editing Leica photos. Obviously, you guys know that recently I just got the new Leica Q2 and it is unreal. It is unmatched. I was taking pictures at a birthday party yesterday. I haven't done that. I've never done that. And I was having a great time. Photos look stellar. And I wanted to dive into the editing process because it is very interesting. And I've changed kind of the editing style that I typically am used to doing on my photos. Also, there's a lot of people in the last video adding remarks of the monitor shaking. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be shaking the monitor. I just talk with my hands, it happens. I moved it out of frame more so that it wouldn't frustrate you as much. See, I read the comments, I'm adapting, I'm here for you. I think the key with editing some of these photos is subtleties. They look so good coming out of the camera and they're so fresh and they're so clear that they don't really require a whole lot of work. So there isn't as much editing as, say, I used to do. Maybe that's just me maturing as a photographer, trying a new style, A and B and C being new camera. I sat on Peter Lindgren's shoulders for this picture because when I saw the window engulfed in greenery, I knew that I wanted the photo to be the entire frame green with the window in the center, and there would be some cropping involved with that. So I thought this was a perfect example to show off the cropping. Now, if we zoom in on this and take a look, everything is very, very sharp. I did the best I could to keep it still sitting on another grown man's shoulders while shooting it. But what that allows us to do is go over here. Let's just crop 4:5 for a second, and we can center that and hit enter. Now, we obviously still have wall on the left, on the top, a little bit on the bottom. So we're gonna crop in even more. We can go all the way in, place that window right in the middle, hit enter, and that's pretty much exactly what I was looking to do. That's just the best I could capture it with the 28mm lens. So now we can go to editing. Typically with greens, I don't like them as green as they always come out of camera. There's too much yellow in the green. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take the yellow out of this picture. So if we slide the HSL tab down, now we can manipulate the green. So just by sliding down, making it a little, I don't wanna go this way. It's the opposite. I wanna go more towards yellow. And then I wanna desaturate that a little bit further, and I wanna take the brightness up slightly. A little bit of a vignette so that this whole frame looked more purposeful, like we didn't just crop it in, and I'm pretty much done. I might mess with the tone curve a little bit to give it some saturation by just making the slightest of S curves. I'd probably be done right there. So that's before, that's after. Now, if we're gonna use a preset, I've been working on a new spring release. Shameless plug. My favorite preset so far being the golden hour lift. If I was to just hover over that, you can see it's almost exactly the same. A lot of desaturation, a lot of cropping, and just removing the yellow and green values and manipulating those so we get something we like, but there's not a lot of editing happening here. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform where you can get started making a website and have something up and running same day. Very easy to use with beautiful templates that are constantly refreshing. They offer all of the sort of basic things you would expect to get with making a website. If you're someone that uses photography to make a living, there's tons of options within that realm itself to help you in your business. Squarespace offer you the ability to make pay gates, having the ability to charge to gain access to certain areas, be it that you want to sell digital products, exclusive content that you have to gain access to, which is a massive part of our ever-growing creator economy. Maybe you're a wedding photographer or a freelance photographer, videographer, whatever. The fact is, you also have the ability to schedule client meetings. Maybe you aren't even a photographer, you're a tattoo artist, and your clients need to see what your availability is. They have the access to go in and see your schedule, book appointments, or change appointments based on that calendar. Lots of tools that are equipped for the entrepreneur in 2022, far beyond the basic all-in-one platform, great portfolios, podcasts, selling things in a store. It goes far beyond. So if you are someone that needs that flexibility, you're someone that needs that portfolio online, that needs that store, those calendars, those features, and a lot more, head over to squarespace.com/McKinnon and get 10% off your first purchase. Or if you're renewing, save yourself some money, get on the internet, and make use of those tools. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, let's move somewhere else. Let's take a look at Maddie's face here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just straighten this out as best I can. If we click and zoom in, look how sharp this is. We're looking at his pores here, guys. The drops on his glasses, the sharpness of his beard. I feel like we could give him a shave right now. This is a raw photo. The only things I might do, let's skip presets for a second. Let's just actually adjust what we have available to us here in the slider panels. I would maybe bring the exposure down slightly. Maybe the highlights just a little. That's it. Maybe increase the contrast a little bit. I'd probably do that with the curves, with a little bit of a bump in the highlights. I want to lift those blacks. I want to desaturate a little bit of that warmth tone in his skin. I'm going to move the tint temperature just slightly to the cooler side. So if we look at before, it's kind of bright, fresh. After, very, very subtle. Now, if we wanted to give it a little more of a stylistic approach to it, one of the things that I've enjoyed a lot lately is less contrast. So I've been bringing that down into the negatives. Not so much that the photo just loses everything. If you look at it, it's just, it looks log. I'm really liking that raw, natural look. Now, if I was to just run a preset on this, golden hour lift, click on that, bring the brightness down. Let's go over to our yellow adjustments, desaturate that slightly, desaturate the orange, raise the shadows just a little, removing a little bit of those highlights. But the blues, I'd like to desaturate a little. Aquas, desaturate a little. So that's before, that's after. Now that preset alone works wonders on landscapes as well. Let's take a look at this landscape photo here. I took this before I had dialed in the camera appropriately. So this is a very good example of how much data is retained and how good the dynamic range really is in this camera, even when you overexpose something like this. So if we were to zoom in, you can see there's detail in the background. There's mountain, there's fog back there. You can see this tree line. This is a great photo. It's just overexposed. But if we just bring the exposure down, you can see how much already comes back from that. Drop the highlights down even more. You could probably come over to dehaze, turn that up a little bit. A simple little S curve, desaturate some yellows, take those greens, move them more towards the yellow side, desaturate the blues just slightly. That's before, that's after. So you can see all the detail now. If we go back into the background, all those trees came alive, all the fog, the whole ridge line. Looks like there's waterfalls back there in the distance. You can see those right there. Little bit of dehaze, no clarity, less Instagram-y, less influencer-y, less hype photo, but more of like a pretty photograph. And that's kind of what I'm leaning into these days. Let's reset that. Let's try a preset, golden hour lift. Okay. Now, all the time when you run a preset, it's not always just going to look great straight off. You might have to make a few adjustments after you've laid the base layer. But literally just by dropping the exposure, bumping the contrast slightly, a little bit of shadows, and bringing those blacks back down, that looks good now. We do a before and after, huge difference. All right, let's go to another one. Let's go inside the sauna. This again is a great example of the dynamic range this Leica has, being that it exposed everything on the inside so well as everything on the outside. The focal point here was his hand, so if we zoom in and look at that, nice and sharp, nicely exposed, but outside, even with just a little bit of highlight drop, you've got cloud detail in the background behind the glass when the exposure was set for here, which is perfect. Golden hour lift, done. Drop the exposure right there. Drop the contrast a little bit. Don't need as much warmth in there. Right there. It doesn't need anything else. Now, how did I get there without a preset? Drag up the contrast, drag down the highlights, little bit of shadow bump there, but I want to bring in my shadow lift here on the curve and we'll even that out. Now it's way too yellow right now, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that, move it more towards the warm side of things. It's subtle. Now let's take a look at that. That's before, that's after. Very, very subtle. Now if you're going to make that on Instagram, you go ahead, 5x4, hit this little button on the top right, bam, that squares you down to what it's going to look like on the gram. Enter, that's cool. And that's how I would edit that photo. This shot here, we're going to add a little bit more, starting with a horizon adjustment. But if we zoom in here, this was as sharp as I could get it, being on a boat that was swaying where I wanted to vomit. A little more contrast, less highlights to bring out all that detail in the sky. Look what we just discovered. You see all this cloud? None of that was there look hidden behind the slider. Love that. S-curve, we're bringing that down. This time I want it to be rich. Like it's looking good right there. Blues, I want to desaturate them slightly. That's going to make it way more dramatic. This is where I might go clarity up to maybe 15, a little bit more vignette. And look, that's just basic panel adjustments. Before, after. Massive difference. When you play with the saturation level of the color itself, that's what I feel gives you a good style. And if you zoom in here, we're looking at all the raindrops on the water. That looks so cool. The highlights in the sky, these guys getting just blasted. Really, really happy with this. Here's a good example of a photo where we're going to manipulate just the greens and the saturation to give it that kind of tonal vibe. And we have, on contrast to that, a really nice dark burgundy jacket that's just going to pop off of this otherwise muted scene. Now, if we were to just do this fast and drop a preset on it, golden hour lift, that pretty much does it right there. Drop the yellows a little bit and you're done. Before, after. There's not a whole lot of editing that went on there, even within the preset once it's applied. But let's see if we can get there without the preset and start with greens. Now, again, moving those more towards yellow and then desaturating and dropping the luminance on them. We've already got more of a look, okay? Before, after, increase our contrast slightly. We're gonna do a little bit of that on the point curve too. I always prefer doing these adjustments on the point curve than just rocking sliders left and right. Before, after. Subtle edits, but impactful. So when you look at that in an Instagram kind of online social media standpoint, that's a good looking photo and it really shows off that jacket. I'd be done right there. Again, less is more. All right, here's a cool shot of Maddie on the beach. Golden hour lift. Click, done. That preset looks fine just as is. I'd probably drop the highlights just a little, maybe a little bit more in the exposure. And that photo, again, still super sharp. I would probably get rid of everyone in the background, and you can do that quite easily. If you left click, we could bring that into Photoshop right here. Hit L, that's your lasso tool, and run it around the things you don't want as tightly cropped as you can, all the way around. Shift, delete, content aware, hit OK. Those people are magically going to disappear. Then you could kind of clone stamp out the rest of the wave just to make it look somewhat natural. And now the people on the beach are gone. Here's another good example of desaturating the obvious colors to get more of a style out of the photo. So looking at this right away, you might be inclined to go over to the purple and just pump those right up so they're nice and colorful and the greens look good and we get some magenta in there and let's raise the saturation. All these colors look phenomenal. Orange, oh, that boat looks so cool. Let's make it nice and bright. And that's the before and that's after. And you're like, I just gave it life. And where, yeah, that's pretty and it looks okay. It's too much. All of that color is almost distracting. So if we go ahead and reset this and kind of apply that same desaturated look, doing everything we've been doing throughout this whole video, you're going to get a photo that looks like this after the fact. This is before, this is after. So you still got color and you still got contrast. I just didn't make it more saturated. You got to remember too, adding contrast also adds saturation. So when you are doing that and manipulating those values, that's also affecting something else. Again, this is all just a style choice. This is how I've been editing my Leica photos over the last month and a half. And it's kind of a sweet spot that I found that I'm really intrigued by and I'm really interested with. The subtlety of editing these photos and keeping them more simple and more of a fine art produces a feeling of its own, and it's a feeling that I've really enjoyed exploring so far within photography and a new camera, new focal lengths, and a new means of editing those photos. I've been used to and accustomed to making things more contrasty, adding more boldness, more heaviness, more weight to a photo, and that weight comes in the form of vignettes, clarity, dropping the shadows, contrast, less exposure. All of those things are making that photo thick and bold. I think with this camera now taking what I'm used to and sort of going the opposite way, whereas I'm doing less contrast and more brightness, really just exploring those values, I feel is opening up new doors to photography that I have since closed long ago. It's making it more fun. I'm having more fun experimenting. And I think that's the only way to learn and improve within photography is experimenting. We're all gonna be those people that crank clarity to 100 at some point. The hope is that you learn from that and that helps dial in your style to something that suits you more. And that is ever changing. That's the one constant, is that there is no constant. what I'm doing today may not be at all relevant to me as an artist 6 months from now. I'm also learning that you can accomplish quite a bit from just the basic panel with very little movement. Presets definitely help, but I would wager they help speed things up more than they help make you a better photographer. Now, speaking of presets, you saw that I used that one quite a bit. There's a few others that I am working on. I don't have them available yet, but they will be available soon, and they're good starting points. They're a great tool to get you going, not necessarily to end the story. Now, you can apply a preset from any creator or any individual or company that you buy it from. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to emulate them and be them and steal their style. You might run that preset and go a completely different direction than I would go. So if you want to check out the presets that I already have available, they are in the link in the description below. We're going to run a 15% sale, 50% off on those current presets, and keep an eye out for that new little spring pack, which is obviously inspired by the Leica Q2. But I will reiterate, presets don't make you a good photographer. Trial and error, shooting all the time, and exploring your options within these different softwares is what makes you a good photographer. So that's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button if you did. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more content like this, editing in Lightroom, behind the desk. I love making them. Love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Oh, I should stop this screen share before it just goes for days. I got 2 new lenses that arrived yesterday that I'm dying to go try out. Get ready for those.